Hello everyone. Anyway, the Mises Caucus just took over the leadership of the Libertarian Party National Chapter at the National Convention in Reno, Nevada, this past Saturday, and there's quite a lot of butthurt about it from the former Libertarian Party establishment and woke leftists that were in the party. Yes, woke leftists were in the Libertarian Party, evidently, and apparently a lot of them are apparently saying that they plan to leave. Anyway, for those of you who aren't familiar, there's been a civil war within the Libertarian Party for the last decade or so, at least, possibly longer. The Civil War was in large part a result of a massive overcorrection that occurred within the party. In the 90s, the Libertarian Party did what was called the paleo strategy, where they tried to form a coalition of sorts with paleo conservatives, who were in some ways the precursors to the Donald Trump-style populists, which are becoming increasingly prominent in the Republican Party today. So basically sort of the Pat Buchanan and Lou Dobbs types. That's who those people are. Now, this strategy was a double-edged sword because on the one hand it introduced some people in the right to liberty, but on the other hand it did bring in some people into the Libertarian Party who actually were racist. Now, I think this number is a bit overblown, and certainly never became a majority. The fact is, it did happen. Now, 2008 Libertarian Party presidential nominee Bob Barr was sort of the last gasp of the paleo strategy. He wasn't a racist, thankfully, but he had a lot of other problems. He led the way in the Clinton impeachment fiasco, and really he should have been impeached for Waco instead of, Lewinsky. Voted for the Patriot Act, voted for the Iraq War, supported the unconstitutional drug war, and voted for the Defense of Marriage Act, among just a few rather questionable policy decisions. Now, he did reverse some of these stances when he ran for the Libertarian Party nomination, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that he did this for political expediency and not out of the, not because he had any sincere change of heart. He couldn't run as a Republican. He knew he couldn't beat McCain in the primary, and there's a 50-50 shot that he was a Fed. It really is a shame because 2004 nominee Michael Badnarik is easily one of the best, possibly the best presidential nominee that the Libertarian Party ever had, with the exception of Ron Paul, who first ran as a Libertarian in 1988. That's right, everyone. 2008's not Ron Paul's first run for president. And if I do a video about the history of the Libertarian Party I'm considering doing, you're probably going to hear all about it. That's going to be on my history channel if I do that video. At first, the Libertarian Party began to appeal more to the center as many Americans, including yours truly, were starting to hear about libertarianism for the first time ever thanks to Ron Paul, who, while he ran as a Republican, was not at all like the other Republicans who were running for president at the time. I still remember it like it was yesterday when Rudy Giuliani and the others all ganged up on him because, well, he actually told the truth about foreign policy. He told the truth about blowback. And they tried to spin it to make it sound like we had it coming on 9/11. Michael Badnarik attempted to do something similar yet different by trying to appeal to disaffected conservatives who didn't like George W. Bush's dramatic expansion of the size and scope of government. And, frankly, most conservatives today aren't really too thrilled with him, as we saw with one of the Bushes essentially losing a statewide election in Texas. And also disaffected liberals, which is what I was at the time, and who thought the Democrats weren't doing enough to fight back against or even complicit in the military-industrial complex and police state. Unfortunately, Gary Johnson, who was the 2012 and 2016 nominee, watered this message down to libertarians being, as he put it, fiscally conservative and socially tolerant, a message that sounds good in theory, but one that incorrectly paints libertarian thought as a hybrid ideology, meant to temper extremes from the more radical ends from both political parties. While most libertarians are not ANCAPs that want to abolish the federal government completely, And I'm not opposed to calling out the left or the right when they're going too far. I don't feel this message is entirely accurate. Abolishing the IRS, getting rid of the welfare state, repealing the 16th Amendment, and getting rid of all gun laws are positions which even most conservatives are afraid to touch, while ending no-knock raids, ending the drug war, and ending qualified immunity will get you mere lip service at best from most self-described progressive Democrats because of the simple fact that these issues are seen as radical by today's standards. If libertarianism is a centrist ideology, why would it adopt positions that are so far outside the current mainstream? Because libertarianism, while it has more in common with the right than the left, at least in current parlance, is completely different from the vast majority of left and right-wing ideologies because it challenges most of their fundamental assumptions about the proper role of government in society by inverting the question of what should government do to does the government have any business doing this in the first place, and is there a way to accomplish these goals without government? The answer to this on many questions, even to minarchist libertarians like myself, is a resounding yes. Now, instead of reaching this assumption, Gary Johnson instead appealed to what is called Beltway libertarianism, aka lifestyle libertarianism, who in many respects fits the negative stereotype of libertarians just being Republicans that like weed. Now, there were many problems with Gary Johnson as a candidate, and going over all of them is beyond the scope of this video, but Gary Johnson, to me at least, came off as more of a 1950s-style liberal Rockefeller Republican than an actual libertarian. And I'm not just saying that because he was the former Republican governor of New Mexico. His running mate, former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld, has a horrible Second Amendment record by supporting, various gun control measures, such as an assault weapons ban, and praised Hillary Clinton as a wonderful public servant. Gary Johnson's foreign policy rejects the non-interventionism which most libertarians support in favor of a foreign policy which is almost entirely indistinguishable from establishment war pigs, like the aforementioned Hillary Clinton, who Bill Weld praised for whatever reason. And what got me to withdraw my support of Gary Johnson in 2016 was him supporting a lawsuit against a conservative Christian baker in Colorado for refusing to bake a gay wedding cake which blatantly violated said baker's religious liberty, private property rights, and freedom of association by essentially compelled speech. Gary Johnson, to put it quite simply, was nothing more than a grifter and quite possibly controlled opposition. Of course, the Beltwayers are the least of the Libertarian Party's problems, as social justice warriors, or SJWs for short, for whatever reason saw fit to infect a Libertarian Party like a malignant tumor. And this is where the overcorrection I mentioned comes in, and some of this is reflected in the rather biased article I linked in the description from Reason Magazine. It was the only Reason article I could find that covered the story, so my apologies for that. If you could find a better article that covers this more objectively, please put it in the comments. But anyway, this is where the overcorrection, again, I mentioned, really gets kicked into overdrive. Several prominent libertarians, like Tom Woods, for example, ended up getting falsely accused of being racist, sexist, homophobic, blah, 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 because they either were affiliated with Ron Paul, the paleo strategy, or because they dared to criticize the excessive focus on group grievance politics the LP was increasingly starting to emphasize, what, as they correctly pointed out, is completely antithetical to personal liberty. Now, exactly how or why a bunch of communists, let's face it, that's exactly what these people are, decided to become registered libertarians is as baffling to me as I'm sure many of you watching this video, whether you're libertarian or not. There is an actual socialist caucus in the Libertarian Party, and while not all these people were part of it, it just really, to me, says quite a lot. Now, as a result of this, several self-described libertarians, yours truly included, decided they wanted nothing to do with the Libertarian Party and identified ourselves as small L libertarians. So, full disclosure, I'm not now, nor was I ever officially registered as part of the Libertarian Party. I was, from 2004, when I was first old enough to vote, until 2008, a registered Democrat. Of course, I was much more left-wing back then than I am now, and then became a registered independent from 2008 until I became a registered Republican this past February. I became an independent because I was disgusted with both parties, and I changed my registration to Republican so I could run for California State Senate as basically a libertarian-leaning Republican, basically in the style of Ron Paul and Thomas Massie. Now, unfortunately, I had to drop out of the race because I couldn't get the necessary signatures to appear on the June 7th primary ballot before the deadline, which I'll go into further detail about in another video. I'm sure many of you are probably wondering why I care so much about the actions of a party I'm not technically affiliated with, and the answer is rather simple. As much as small L libertarians like myself and many others may insist the Libertarian Party and Libertarian Movement are two completely different things, the general public will always associate the Libertarian Party with the Libertarian Movement, which means when the Libertarian Party screws up, it reflects poorly on the broader Libertarian Movement in addition to the Libertarian Party, a movement I care a great deal about because I strongly believe that libertarianism is the logical conclusion of the classical liberal ideas that created our constitutional republic, and is becoming increasingly apparent may be the only thing that can save it from collapse. If we must have a libertarian party, then it's not so much to ask for said party to attempt as best as it can to live up to the ideals of economic and personal liberty, which typify libertarian thought. Although this is a moment for celebration which will no doubt help repair the damaged reputation of the movement, we can't get complacent. Former Libertarian Party Chairman Nick Sarwark, along with many others who have been given the boot by the Reno Reset, are planning to raise millions of dollars to support candidates within the Libertarian Party to oppose pro-Mises Caucus candidates. The same Nick Sarwark who violated the non-aggression principle by getting violent during the Reno convention after he lost. Nick Sarwark is still a profound danger to the movement that we cannot afford to underestimate. As a result of the Reno Reset, there's been changes to the Libertarian Party platform, changes I'll go over in Part 2, and with what I hope the future will bring. Although Part 2 will take a bit longer to release than Part 2 of my previous multi-part series due to some planned videos I have about the upcoming primary in my home state of California, including, of course, the gubernatorial race. Until then, I will see you later.